The first thing Sergeant Nathan Cross felt was the taste of blood and smoke in his mouth. The second was the hard realization that he was upside down, suspended in what used to be a military-grade drop pod, now a mangled metal coffin half buried in alien jungle. His left leg was pinned, his HUD was fried, and something inside his ribcage didn't feel like it belonged there. As he blinked the red haze from his eyes, the comms sparked briefly with static, and a garbled voice crackled through. "Command to Ghost, status check. Sergeant Cross, do you copy?" A long pause followed. Then another voice, not human, cut through the static with bone-chilling clarity. "We found the pod. No life detected. Proceed to trophy collection." Cross grinned through the pane, spat blood onto the dashboard, and whispered to no one in particular. "Dead, huh? Works for me." 6 hours earlier, Cross had been en route to Fort Alara, babysitting a convoy of fresh recruits who'd never seen real combat. Routine run, they said. Low-risk escort, they said. But space doesn't care about predictions. A sudden ambush from a cloaked Varnak raider squadron tore through the convoy like paper. Cross's ship was hit by a plasma bolt, and his pilot did what any sensible person would do, dumped the cargo and punched out. Cross never made it to the lifeboat. Instead, he was kicked out in a one-man emergency pod, set to land on the nearest Class 4 habitable rock, Traction 9. Habitable, it turned out, was military code for "only kills you slower." Now, lying upside down in a jungle that hissed and clicked like it was hungry, Cross reached for the emergency kit, grabbed the field stim, and stabbed it into his leg. The pain receded just enough to let him breathe. He crawled out of the wreck, limping on a makeshift crutch made from the pod's stabilizer arm. The clearing he landed in was unnaturally silent. No birds. No insects. Just the distant sound of something dragging itself across mossy rock. Cross muttered, "Yup, definitely not Kansas." Across the ridge, several Varnak hunters, bipedal reptilian warriors with armor grown from their own biology, stood watching the crash site through infrared visors. They spoke in low, guttural clicks and gurgles, translated into rough galactic standard via comm implants. "Only one life form detected. Soft body. Human. Primitive." The squad leader, Gorin, cracked his clawed knuckles. "They call this one Ghost. Probably just another flesh bag who hides behind trees." The others laughed. Loudly. They weren't alone for long. Drones scouted ahead, flitting through the canopy like metallic hornets, scanning for life signs. One of them got close, too close, to a pile of rust-colored leaves, and in an instant, it shorted out and crashed, its camera lens severed cleanly. The Varnak paused. Another drone circled in, only to vanish in a burst of static. "Traps," Gorin snarled. "He's already watching." Cross, now perched in the limbs of a massive bark-skinned tree, watched through half-functional optics. He marked the Varnak movement paths, noting how predictably confident they were. That was good. He liked Cocky. Cocky made mistakes. He retrieved a broken drone's energy cell and rigged it with 2 pressure clamps and a strip of explosive resin from his pod's damaged hull. Not military issue, but enough to flash fry a small area. He planted it inside a rotted log, chuckling. "Welcome to the Ghost Tour, fellas. We've got snacks." As night fell, the jungle lit up with bioluminescent plants and glowing spores that danced like fireflies on acid. Cross moved like a phantom, barefoot and bleeding, but silent. He'd learned from his survival training, when technology fails, instincts kick in. And Cross's instincts were terrifyingly sharp. He spent 5 years stationed on Helion Prime, fighting insurgents who could blend into shadows. Compared to them, these Varnak were noisy children with heat vision and delusions of superiority. One of the hunters, younger and overeager, broke formation and stalked ahead. He found the broken pod. He found Cross's blood trail. He smirked. "Simple prey," he whispered, aiming his plasma bolt rifle. Then his foot stepped on what looked like a vine. It snapped. A moment later, the log above him exploded. The shockwave hurled him into a thicket of thorn vines that didn't just wrap, they pierced. His screams echoed through the jungle. The others raced to him, only to find his body hanging upside down, armor stripped, weapon missing, and a human voice recorded onto his own comm link. It played on loop. Boo! Panic set in. Back in the trees, Cross munched on a nutrient bar that tasted like stale rubber, and considered his next move. He didn't need to beat them. He just needed to make them afraid. War wasn't about who had the biggest gun. It was about who controlled the story. If they thought he was a ghost, then he'd become one. By morning, 2 more Varnak were missing. One vanished near a sulfur spring, his armor found floating in the acidic pool. The other had his visor shattered and scrawled with a single word etched in alien script. Leave! Goran growled in frustration, punching a nearby rock and cracking it down the middle. He's playing games. Enough of this. We flush him out. Burn the jungle if we must. But even as they prepared incendiary rounds, the jungle changed. The creatures that normally fled from fire began circling their camp. Cross had diverted their energy pulses. Now the predators, massive, insected things with mandibles that could split steel, thought the Varnak were the threat. Or the meal. Watching from above, Cross couldn't help himself. He activated an old military recorder and whispered into it, voice calm, amused, and just a little unhinged. Sergeant Nathan Cross. Callsign Ghost. Crashed behind enemy lines. Wounded, low on ammo, no backup. So far, body counts 4. Mission status, improving. One of the Varnak screamed as something pulled him into the underbrush, and Cross leaned back against the tree with a wince. Guess we're gonna need more tags. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the jungle hum around him. The hunt had begun. But they didn't understand yet. He wasn't the one being hunted. He was the one doing the haunting. Morning on Draction 9 came with a strange calm, as if the jungle itself was holding its breath. The creatures were quiet. The wind was still. And deep in the canopy, Sergeant Nathan Cross sat sharpening a shard of Varnak armor into a blade. His hands moved methodically, but his mind was racing. He'd already taken down 4 of the hunters, but something told him the real challenge hadn't even arrived yet. He'd poked the hive. Now the queen was coming. Down in the clearing, what remained of Goran's hunting team gathered around a flickering holomap. Their arrogance had drained away, replaced by frustration and dread. Each of them had seen the traps. The precision. The mocking messages. This wasn't just some stranded soldier running for his life. This was a predator who had decided to make them the prey. Goran's eyes burned with rage as he shouted at the others in his guttural language. Then, without ceremony, a new figure stepped into the clearing, and the entire camp fell silent. He was taller than the others. Bulkier. Clad in obsidian armor laced with circuitry and glowing scars that pulsed like veins of lava. His right arm was entirely mechanical, ending in a serrated blade that whirred softly as he moved. His name was Threx, and he didn't walk so much as stalk. The moment his boots hit the ground, the air seemed to grow colder. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't need to. Every Varnak knew his reputation. Where Goran's squad was elite, Threx was something else, something engineered. He glanced at the map, then at Goran, and finally at the jungle beyond. Still think he's just a soldier? He asked. His voice was low, calm, and terrifying. Goran said nothing. Threx didn't wait for a reply. He simply muttered, "You've been chasing a ghost. Now I hunt him." Cross, of course, had already spotted Threx long before the others knew he was there. The new arrival moved differently, slower, but with purpose. He didn't fall for bait trails or step into ambushes. He was reading the jungle like a map. Cross studied him through a cracked monocular lens, chewing the last of his nutrient paste. He wasn't sure what this new hunter was, but he recognized the type. Not a warrior. A problem solver. A cleaner. They didn't send guys like Threx unless they wanted someone erased. Back at his makeshift camp, nothing more than a hollowed-out root system rigged with motion sensors and sound deflectors, Cross checked his supplies. 2 plasma cartridges, 1 good knife, a half-charged pulse emitter, and a half-busted medkit that smelled like burnt socks. He considered his options. He couldn't outrun them. And now that Threx was leading the hunt, he probably couldn't outsmart them for long either. He needed an edge. That edge came when he stumbled onto the ruins. Deep in the jungle, past the sulfur pits and blackwater swamps, Cross found an overgrown temple built by something older than the Varnak. Massive stone towers carved with spiral patterns. Doorways too wide for humans, too narrow for beasts. And inside, machinery, dead now, but humming faintly with residual energy. He stepped through the entrance carefully, flashlight flickering across vines, bones, and strange glyphs that pulsed when he got near. He didn't know what the temple was built for, but he knew exactly what to do with it. He'd found his battleground. Back in the jungle, Threx moved his team with tactical precision. He split the remaining hunters into pairs and sent them in sweeping arcs, each route designed to herd Cross toward a central kill zone. What he didn't know was that Cross had already mapped the same terrain hours ago. He'd left false trails and repositioned ancient trap mechanisms inside the ruin. By the time the first two hunters entered, they were already dead. One stepped on a floor tile that collapsed instantly, dropping him into a spiked pit with a scream that echoed through the stone. The other was sliced clean in half by a horizontal laser beam Cross had powered with a salvaged drone battery and a reflective shard of Varnak visor. Threx didn't flinch when he heard the screams. He simply whispered into his comm. "He's in the ruin. He's turned it into a kill box." Cross watched Threx approach the entrance, and felt his heart pound harder. This wasn't a game anymore. Threx wasn't bluffing, wasn't afraid. And unlike the others, he wasn't annoyed by the challenge, he was enjoying it. Cross moved deeper into the ruin, leaving behind a trail of distractions. Holograms? Recorded footsteps. Mocking Varnak phrases scrawled in blood across the walls. Threx followed with brutal efficiency, disarming every trap, avoiding every lure. Cross waited in the center chamber, the only place where the ceiling was high enough for a proper fight. He'd cleared the debris, laid out a perimeter, and hidden 2 charged cells inside old statues. He didn't want to fight Threx hand to hand. But he didn't have a choice anymore. Threx entered the chamber like a god descending into war. His eyes adjusted instantly to the dim light, and he smiled, not with mockery, but respect. "You've made this fun," he said. "But it ends now." Cross didn't waste time with speeches. He lunged, slashing with his homemade blade, aiming for the gaps in the armor. Threx parried with ease, countering with a backhand that sent Cross tumbling into a pillar. Pain shot through his chest, but he rolled with it, grabbed a piece of fallen stone, and threw it at one of the charged cells. It detonated in a flash of light and sound. Threx stumbled, blinded just long enough for Cross to drive the blade into his side. Sparks flew. Not blood, just sparks. Cross realized too late that the armor wasn't just tech, it was alive. It pulsed around the blade, absorbing the impact, and flung him backward again. Threx roared and advanced, blade arms spinning. Cross rolled under a second blow, grabbed a fallen spear from the floor, and jabbed it upward into Threx's underarm. This time, he felt it connect with something soft. Threx hissed and slammed his fist into Cross's chest, cracking ribs. Cross collapsed, coughing up blood, vision swimming. He fumbled for the second charge cell, hidden beneath a loose floor tile. Threx raised his blade arm for the final strike. Then Cross smiled through bloody teeth. Boom! The second cell exploded in a blinding flash, sending both of them flying. Threx crashed into a wall and lay still. Cross crawled away, half-conscious, breath ragged. He reached the exit of the temple and collapsed against the root, barely able to see. Somewhere in the darkness, he heard Threx groan. Not dead. Just pissed. Cross laughed, a weak, wheezing sound that echoed through the trees. "You're tough," he muttered. "But I'm stubborn." And with that, he passed out, clutching the spear like a lifeline, the jungle watching in silence once again. The jungle had gone quiet again, but it wasn't the peaceful kind of quiet. It was the kind where everything was watching, waiting, calculating. Sergeant Nathan Cross awoke coughing, spitting out blood and dirt in equal measure. His body screamed in protest as he dragged himself to the edge of the temple ruins, every breath feeling like fire in his chest. He had no idea how long he'd been unconscious, but the burns on his side were blistered, and the gash on his leg was starting to smell like rot. Somewhere behind him, Threx had survived the blast. Cross could feel it in the air, like a storm waiting just beyond the tree line. He didn't beat Threx. He'd only bought time. He limped toward a shallow stream trickling through the jungle, dragging a piece of scavenged armor for balance. He dunked his face in the water, letting the cold sting his nerves awake, and stared at his reflection. The man looking back at him was barely recognizable, filthy, bloodied, eyes sunken, but still alive. Still fighting. Still thinking. Somewhere between pain and delirium, Cross let out a laugh. Not the brave kind. The broken kind. The kind of laugh that knew the universe had one cruel sense of humor. He muttered to himself. All this just for a convoy of rookies who probably didn't even make it. He needed help. Not extraction. Not reinforcements. Just a break, anything to give him an edge. He climbed toward higher ground to find a signal, carrying the last functioning piece of tech from his pod, a miniature beacon core. It wasn't strong enough to transmit off-planet, but maybe he could use it to draw attention. Just not the kind that got him killed. He found a ridge line that overlooked a thick basin choked with glowing vines and sulfur mist. From the stench and the occasional burst of flame from below, he figured the area was geologically unstable. That gave him an idea. He jury-rigged the beacon to emit short, sharp pulses, enough to agitate the wildlife. Draction 9 was filled with predators that reacted to heat, sound, or energy. If he couldn't kill Threx and his squad directly, maybe he could lure something that could. As the pulses rang out, Cross didn't have to wait long. Below, massive shapes stirred. Four-legged beasts the size of tanks, with jaws that split vertically and eyes that reflected blue like shattered glass, began to shift through the fog. Apex predators, the kind that didn't scare easy. The kind that hadn't yet noticed Cross. But with just the right bait they would. Elsewhere, Threx had rejoined the remaining hunters. Only 3 were left now, and even they were starting to fray at the edges. One refused to remove his helmet, convinced that Cross had tampered with the visor. Another jumped at shadows, muttering about ghosts speaking in his sleep. Goran was gone, presumed dead. Threx didn't care. He didn't hunt with loyalty, only purpose. And right now, that purpose had teeth. He's bleeding. Weak. And clever, Threx said flatly. But he's also alone. He'll try to turn the planet against us. One of the Varnak scoffed. Let him. We are hunters. Threx turned and grabbed the soldier by the throat, lifting him effortlessly. No. We were hunters. Now we are targets. Respect that. Or you'll join the ones who didn't. Cross spotted them moving through the jungle just as the predator pack closed in behind them. Timing was everything. He triggered a spike in the beacon's frequency, then disabled it. Like flipping a switch, the predators snapped toward the Varnak trail, drawn by the residual energy. Cross watched as chaos erupted. The first Varnak never saw it coming. 1 second, he was walking point. The next, his upper body vanished inside a creature's jaws. The second tried to fire, but the sulfur clogged his weapon. He died screaming as claws ripped through his armor like paper. Threx reacted instantly, slicing at a charging beast with his blade arm, severing a limb and shoving his last remaining soldier out of the way. Cross, watching from above, whispered, "Now that's a distraction." He moved fast, using the chaos to slip into a new section of the jungle. But not before planting a signal spike from the destroyed beacon. If the predators wanted more, they'd follow the scent trail he left behind. And Threx? He'd be too busy surviving to track him for a while. Or so Cross thought. Hours passed. The sun never fully rose, just shifted the sky from deep purple to sickly orange. Cross found a new hiding place, a crevice beneath the roots of a collapsed tree, wide enough to crawl into, dark enough to hide his heat signature. He treated his wounds with a mix of alien moss and field gel, biting down on a stick to keep from screaming. When the pain passed, he sat there, breathing in the humid air, and listened to the planet. No gunfire. No growls. Just the thrum of insects, and the distant thunder of shifting earth. He almost drifted into sleep before hearing footsteps. Not stomping. Not charging. Just one set. Steady. Measured. Heavy. Threx. Cross stayed perfectly still, watching through a crack in the roots as the massive figure stepped into view, armor scorched, claw marks across his helmet. He carried 2 weapons now, his arm blade, and a staff made from the spine of one of the predator beasts. His visor flickered, scanning the terrain, pausing only briefly over Cross's hiding place. Cross didn't breathe. Threx didn't stop. He just kept walking. But Cross knew better. That pause meant something. When night returned, Cross moved again. He found a waterfall with a pool beneath it, and used the cold water to cool his body and clean his wounds. He took a moment to look up at the stars beyond the jungle canopy and thought of Earth, not the politics, not the war, but the quiet things. Coffee. City lights. His sister's old dog that always stole his socks. Then he laughed again, because none of it mattered unless he survived the next day. As he set up another trap line, something cracked behind him. He spun, blade raised, but stopped short. It wasn't Threx. It was a young Varnak scout. Alone. Weapon holstered. Hands up. The scout looked terrified. But not of Cross. "I don't want to fight," the scout said in broken English. "Threx will kill us all. He doesn't care about honor. He only wants blood." Cross stared at him for a long time. He didn't trust the Varnak. But he also didn't sense a lie. "Why tell me?" he asked. The scout hesitated, then stepped closer. "Because you fight like us. Not for orders. For survival. And if we don't stop him, none of us get off this rock alive." Against every instinct, Cross lowered his blade. Maybe, just maybe, this nightmare had room for an alliance. But only until one of them died. The jungle was burning. Smoke curled through the canopy in long, black ribbons while the ground itself quaked with the fury of clashing beasts and plasma bursts. Sergeant Nathan Cross ran with fire at his back and blood on his face, the sound of his own heartbeat drowned by explosions behind him. He was out of tricks. Out of time. And Threx was still alive. He sprinted across a broken stretch of ridgeline, leaping over molten cracks that split the earth like angry scars. His side was screaming, wrapped tight with cloth soaked in antiseptic and hope. The young Varnak scout who had allied with him, Norik, had not made it through the last ambush. Threx's blade had found him just as he was reactivating a signal relay, and Cross hadn't been fast enough to stop it. The last thing Norik had said before dying was whispered with quiet awe. "You are more Varnak than human." Cross hadn't known how to reply, so he didn't. Now, alone again, he raced toward the one place he'd been avoiding since the crash, the broken remains of his drop pod. He had left it behind on purpose, thinking it was too compromised to be of any use. But now he needed something only it could offer, the nuclear core buried deep in the flight deck. Even fried and unstable, it had just enough charge to end things. One way or another. Behind him, the jungle erupted as Threx broke through a thicket of flame and debris, armor glowing with residual plasma, his cybernetic arms sparking but still deadly. He wasn't chasing anymore. He was hunting with singular purpose. Cross could feel it, like pressure in his chest. Threx had bled. He had suffered. And that had only made him more dangerous. He wasn't just there to win. He wanted to erase Cross. Cross dove into the remnants of the pod, now little more than a metal skeleton twisted by impact and time. The console was shattered, but the core housing was intact, barely. He worked quickly, ignoring the tremble in his hands as he exposed the internal matrix and overrode the containment failsafes. He didn't need a full detonation. He needed a directional surge, enough to cook the surrounding terrain and anything standing on it. Including himself, if it came to that. As he worked, Threx arrived, stepping into the clearing with all the inevitability of death itself. He didn't raise his weapon. He didn't speak. He just watched. Cross didn't look up until the last wire was connected. Then he stood slowly, arms relaxed at his sides. "Funny thing," Cross said, voice hoarse. "I was supposed to be off duty after this run. 2 more days, and I'd have been back on Luna Base, arguing about coffee rations and broken elevators." He gave a half-smile. "Instead, I got you." Threx's voice was quiet. "You earned me." Cross circled slowly, trying to keep distance. "So what happens now? You kill me, take my body back to whatever free show lab you came from, and claim your prize?" Threx tilted his head. "No. I kill you and leave nothing to take back." He raised his blade. "You humiliated my kind. You made us run. You made us fear. That cannot be allowed. Guess we agree on something." Cross muttered, and then he charged. The fight was unlike anything before. No traps. No stealth. Just raw, brutal violence. Cross ducked the first swing, driving his makeshift blade into Threx's side. Sparks. He twisted, trying to disable the power conduit in the arm, but Threx slammed a knee into his stomach, lifting him off the ground. Cross crashed against the pod hull, vision swimming. He rolled as the blade arm came down, slicing deep into the metal. They traded blows like animals. Fists. Knees. Choking hands. Cross fought like a man with nothing to lose, every movement fueled by rage and desperation. He landed a punch that cracked Threx's visor. Threx retaliated by grabbing Cross's wrist and snapping it with a sickening crunch. Cross screamed but didn't stop. He slammed his head into Threx's face, staggering him, then stabbed the broken end of a wiring rod into the exposed circuits on Threx's chest. The explosion knocked them both back. Cross dragged himself up, coughing and broken. Threx rose more slowly this time, his movements glitching, sparks pouring from his damaged side. But he was still coming. Cross backed toward the pod, bleeding from too many places to count. He reached down, grabbed the final trigger device wired to the exposed nuclear core, and looked Threx in the eyes. "You wanted to erase me?" Cross said, voice raw. "I've been erased before. It didn't take." He pressed the trigger. The ground didn't just shake, it screamed. A wave of heat burst outward, vaporizing trees, melting stone, and engulfing the entire clearing in white-hot plasma. The explosion wasn't nuclear, but it was close, enough to flash-cook the atmosphere in a 500-meter radius. The jungle outside the blast zone went dead silent. Minutes passed. Then, from the scorched wreckage, movement. Ash and smoke parted as a shape stumbled forward, coughing violently. Cross. Burned. Bloodied. Barely alive. But alive. The pod's side hull had shielded him from the worst of the blast. Threx had not been so lucky. Only pieces remained, fragments of armor, the shattered remains of his blade, and a single, sparking arm still twitching in the dirt. Cross looked down at it, and gave a faint, mirthless chuckle. He collapsed to his knees and lay back, staring up at the blackened sky. The stars were visible now through the holes in the canopy. He thought about Norik. About the rookies. About how his call sign was Ghost, not because he was invisible, but because wherever he went, people remembered. Eventually, a ship appeared on the horizon. A sleek human transport cruiser, its searchlights scanning the jungle. It descended slowly, cautiously, no doubt responding to the beacon Cross had rigged just before the final fight. Soldiers spilled out, weapons drawn, confused by the devastation around them. Then they saw him. "Sergeant Cross?" One called out, disbelief in his voice. "Holy hell, you're alive?" Cross didn't answer right away. He just lifted a shaky hand and pointed behind him. "Don't touch the arm," he croaked. "Might still bite." They carried him onto the ship, patched him up with stabilizers, and ran every skin imaginable. As they lifted off, one of the soldiers leaned in. "You were alone out there for over a week. They said you were dead." Cross stared at him, eyes half-lidded. So did the guys who tried to kill me. Back on the ship, a commander debriefed him personally. Cross handed him a data chip scavenged from Threx's armor, containing comm logs, hunting routes, and something else. A proposal from Norik. An alliance. Proof that not all Varnak wanted war. Cross looked the commander in the eye and said, I didn't just survive. I started something. He leaned back, closed his eyes, and smiled. Ghosts don't die. They haunt. The debrief room smelled like recycled air and disinfectant, sterile, quiet, almost insultingly peaceful after what Nathan Cross had endured. He sat alone at the edge of a reinforced table, arms wrapped in fresh synth skin and torso bound in medwraps that itched like fire. His broken wrist was stabilized by a high-pressure splint, and one eye remained swollen shut, a bruised map of the jungle still written across his face. Outside the reinforced glass wall, officers and analysts watched him like a lab specimen, whispering behind their datapads. He didn't care. He was used to being observed, studied, underestimated. They hadn't seen what he'd seen. They hadn't been there. A soft chime sounded and the door hissed open. A woman stepped inside, straight-backed, eyes sharp, wearing the dark blue of Central Intelligence Command. Her rank insignia gleamed against her collar, but her expression was harder than her uniform. Cross didn't stand. She didn't ask him to. Instead, she sat across from him, laid a tablet on the table, and tapped a few times until it displayed a hologram, Threx's last known bioreadings before his signature flatlined. They flickered and died like a heart monitor going cold. You detonated a Class 3 nuclear core inside alien territory without authorization, she said calmly. Cross stared at the hologram. Not the dumbest thing I've done this month. You destroyed a half-kilometer radius of classified terrain. Killed 5 Varnak elite. And you handed us what appears to be a diplomatic proposal written in blood by a rogue alien warrior. I was improvising. She didn't laugh. Didn't even smirk. And yet, you're alive. Somehow. Cross let out a slow breath and sat back in the chair, shoulder muscles tensing from the pain. Yeah, well. Ghosts don't follow the rules. The agent turned off the hologram and set the tablet aside. Do you know what this means, Sergeant? Cross raised an eyebrow. I'm guessing a medal. Maybe a court-martial. Depends on how well you sleep at night. She leaned forward, voice lowering. It means you've just become a strategic variable. An unknown. A symbol. Do you have any idea how many people, on both sides, want a story like yours buried? Cross shook his head. Then you're not listening. Burying it is what starts wars. Letting it live? That might end one. She studied him for a long moment, then sighed. We're transferring you to a black site off Hellion Prime. You'll receive full medical care, psych evaluation, and restricted clearance until we decide what to do with you. Cross leaned forward now. You can try. But I'm not done. She blinked. Excuse me? He pointed to her tablet. Norik's message wasn't just a last wish. It was proof. A seed. There are Varnak who don't want this endless cycle. He wasn't the only one. And you think Threx was the worst they've got? He wasn't. He was just the one they thought could clean up their mistake. And I was the mistake. The agent's posture tightened. So what, you want to go back out there? Play ambassador now? You're a soldier, not a diplomat. I'm a survivor, Cross said flatly. And survivors build what dead men can't. She stood up, smoothing the creases from her uniform. You're being watched, Sergeant. Very closely. I'd suggest you stay quiet and heal. He smiled. I've never been good at staying quiet. That night, as the ship jumped to FTL, Cross sat by the medbay window, staring out at the stars. His body ached in ways he couldn't explain, and the nightmares hadn't let up. He still saw Threx's eyes when he closed his own. Still heard the jungle whispering like it had a pulse. Still smelled the ash of Norik's burned remains. And yet, for all the scars, he felt more alive now than he ever had in uniform. War had stripped everything away, orders, protocols, chains of command, and left only truth. Out there in the jungle, it hadn't mattered who gave the orders. What mattered was survival, instinct, and connection. Norik had been the enemy on paper. But in the dirt, in the fire, he'd been the only one who understood. The medbay lights dimmed. Most of the crew slept. Cross didn't. 3 days later, on Hellion Prime, they brought him into a war room hidden beneath a mountain base. Officers and advisors gathered around, holograms swirling in front of them, battle reports, intercepted Varnak transmissions, and one particularly grainy image taken from an orbital drone. It showed a group of Varnak warriors surrounding a human-shaped statue carved into the jungle stone. At its feet, strange symbols had been painted. Cross recognized one of them. Ghost. The room was silent as the general in charge turned to Cross. "They're building monuments to you." Cross looked at the image and laughed. "Weird. I always figured if I made it into a statue, I'd be holding a beer." The general didn't laugh. "You've become a myth to them. A symbol of fear. But also, respect. We've intercepted chatter from fringe Varnak colonies calling for a ceasefire. Not because we demanded it. Because they think you changed the balance." Cross's voice was calm. "I didn't change anything. I just reminded them what we're capable of." The general nodded slowly. "We're authorizing a small team to return to Draction 9. Covert. Recon only. We want to see if this truce talk has teeth. You'll be on that team." Cross didn't hesitate. "When do we leave?" Later, alone in his quarters, he sat beside a locker filled with his recovered gear, patched, scorched, but familiar. His old dog tags lay inside, and next to them, a small totem. Varnak bone, etched with Norik's family mark. He picked it up, turned it over in his hand, and closed his fist around it. This wasn't over. Not because he craved vengeance or medals, but because he'd seen something raw in that jungle, something honest. The line between hunter and hunted, soldier and savage, enemy and ally, it had blurred. And in that blur Cross had found clarity. He strapped on his boots, checked the blade he'd reforged from Threx's shattered arm, and grinned to himself. Ghosts don't retire. They haunt forever.